Welcome to I Play, Therefore I Am. In our conversations with extraordinary games industry professionals, we discover their unique career stories, and we also find out about their personal development and philosophical journeys.
This podcast is a co-production of MediaNet, Berlin-Brandenburg, and Now Media, and brought to you fresh from the games capital Berlin, as part of the program MediaNet Games International.
I'm Simon.
I'm Florian, and we will be your hosts for this program.
Gaming meets philosophy. I play, therefore I am.
Hello and welcome back to the podcast. As you just heard, we've updated the name. So first up, some housekeeping. We are back with Season 2, the DLC, the expansion, the remaster, the podcast as a service. Please insert another coin to stay subscribed to the podcast. New name, new guests, new season. Let's see where we go. Second thing, as is best practice and tradition at this point in the games industry, for the launch day, we have to start with apologizing to you for not delivering a finished project. Numerous people have spent numerous hours, and yet you will only get roughly 1.5 hours of playtime with this episode. We promise to work tirelessly to update the podcast over the next months. Be sure to regularly check in with your favorite podcast platform. Our guest today is Kate Edwards, who is a great guest for the first episode of this new season. She's an award-winning advocate. She has been in the industry for so many years, is a Forbes Women 50 over 50 list nominee and laureate, I think is the correct English word. She is a speaker, an advisor, has been a geographer, and works in culturalization for games projects. That these are so many things. And if you know Kate, which is a good chance, then you know what stands behind all of these things. But we are here to deep dive into this and to see what that means. Her projects and companies she's running or has been a part of range from Microsoft to now being a director of the Global Game Jam, being the CEO of her own company, Geogrify, and running her other company, Set Jetters. We will go into these of the podcast, so be sure to listen in. And hello, Kate.
Hello.
How are you doing?
I'm doing great. It's great to be here.
Yeah, you are our first guest in the podcast from the US, actually. The project that this podcast is a part of has become a new podcast, has received an update. We are now also focusing on the transatlantic connection from Berlin to the US and Canada as well. So podcast recordings now are with a time difference, in this case 9 hours, but we found a perfect schedule because you are a morning person. We are evening people, so that is great. Thanks for being here. Simon as well is the co-host, as always. Hello, Simon.
Hi, I'm here. Great intro. I was not ready for that. Yeah, please insert coins to subscribe to the podcast. And sorry for the, you know the drill. I agree. No, great to be here. Great to have you, Kate. Super, super excited for many awesome stories from a veteran's veteran, I think.
Well, and being, I guess, the first guest from the US, I hope I represent well.
Represent. You can do that. You guys can do that.
Yes, definitely. That's also why you were an immediate thought for who we should choose for the first episode, and I'm glad it worked out. Yeah, so many things to talk about. Maybe a little background because that in itself to me is very interesting. How did I meet Kate? This was through my previous work at Game On in Lithuania. Many people before who had worked at Game On had, I think, already tried to stretch out their arms, reach out to you and get you as a speaker to Lithuania. And in, I think, 2019, it finally worked out. We got you there because you wanted to check out Game On and be in Lithuania. One of the reasons being that your family has roots there. And so you also took the time to come over and do some research there. And that, I think, is very interesting and leads into the whole, let's say, cultural and geographic topic. You are very interested in this. Tell us a little bit about your background in, like, I would say maybe unconventional way of getting into games and into the industry.
Yeah, well, it was interesting because I remember how excited I was when you reached out to me about speaking in Lithuania. Because as a geographer, you want to go everywhere on the face of the earth, and it was one of those places that I was particularly interested in going to, mainly because my maternal grandmother was from Lithuania, and I remember, I mean, that was growing up in Southern California, and my grandmother eventually moved out to California and lived with us. The Lithuanian part of her culture didn't really come through a lot to me or to my brother, except for her cursing at us in Lithuanian every once in a while when we were not behaving as we should have. But other than that, it never really came out a lot. But then as I got older, and especially after I left home and I had a chance, as I was more of an adult, I would have these conversations with her about her childhood and what it was like. And it was just so fascinating to me. But it did already, because at that point I was already very much steeped into geography as my career path. But I can describe kind of how that came about, because it was not intentional. I think going back to my childhood, one thing that really influenced me a lot was that both my parents were school teachers. And so, in the US, as I guess in many countries, the summertime, the teachers have off. And so what our family did is we often did road trips, which is a, very popular thing to do in a lot of places, especially in the US. So we would basically hop in the car, and the four of us, my older brother and I and my parents, and we would just go to different places. My paternal grandmother lived in East Texas, so we would often drive out to Texas to visit her in the summertime, which is like the absolute worst time you could visit East Texas because it's really hot and really humid. But we would do these trips, and I mean, we were doing it since I was really young. I think I remember we did a road trip to Canada when I was 7 years old. So we went up into Canada, and of course we live very close to the Mexican border, so we are often in Mexico as well. So I think from a very early age, I was having this exposure, the kind of the joy of discovery, and, what is it like to meet new people and to go to new places, even within your own country or, the immediate adjacent countries, which, for growing up in the US, to be able to cross into any country is a novelty compared to Europe, where you can do that, just by taking a few steps. But in the US, you got to make the effort to get into another country, since there's not very many opportunities. But I just really loved doing that. I loved road trips. And even to this day, I still love road trips. But my career path was really set in motion by the moon landing in 1969, because I was 4 years old. And I remember watching it on my grandmother's TV. I remember it like it was yesterday. I can clearly see the TV and everything, watching when, Neil Armstrong stepped on the moon. And I distinctly remember seeing it. I remember running outside and looking up at the moon. And I remember telling my dad, I said, "Oh, look, I can see them." And what I was seeing is that the moon was in conjunction with Venus. So you could see like this bright, spot, a bright star planet, near the moon on that day. And so when I was looking up there, I said, "Oh, look, I can see them." And of course, my dad, he's like, "No, you can't." But
If you
and also,
believe.
Santa Claus doesn't exist. In
yeah,
case you didn't know yet.
yeah, exactly. So it's like, yeah, that's when the moment the talk happened. Here's all the things that don't exist. But it so inspired me. It really did. It got me so excited about, the future. And we also if you think about the context at the time, the world at that time was very much in the quote space age. I mean, we were in the space race with the Soviet Union. we meaning the US, of course, but there was a lot of optimism about what space meant to the future of humanity, while at the same time, we had a lot of really big struggles going on. We had the Vietnam War that was happening, which I was not yet aware of at that age. We also had all the racial struggles in the issues in the United States, and Martin Luther King, and we had Bobby Kennedy's assassination. I mean, all of that stuff was happening around that time. But then what was on TV at that time? Star Trek, the original Star Trek was on. So, you had this huge juxtaposition of kind of hope and vision for a future. And then you have the space program kind of supporting that. But then you had all this, geopolitical and cultural strife going on, which I only became aware of later. When I was young, a few years later, I do remember watching the Vietnam War on TV. I remember Richard Nixon's resignation. I was 8 years old when the president gave his resignation on television. So I do remember little pieces of that time period. But the space part of it is really what excited me. And so if we fast forward to when I graduated high school, I had made a decision that I want to be an astronaut for real. Not like just, I think it'd be cool. No, I wanted to be an astronaut. I wanted to go into space because I thought that would be the most awesome thing you could do. And so I went into aerospace engineering. I ended up going to Cal Poly San Luis Obispo, which is a really great engineering school in Central California. And so I did 1 year of aerospace engineering. And the reason I only did 1 year is because calculus completely killed me. So I'm a very right-brained person. I'm left-handed, right-brained. I'm very geospatial in my thinking. I'm an artist. I have a lot of background in art and design. That was because, like, as a kid, I was just doodling and writing like all the time, just constantly writing, drawing stuff, constantly writing my own stories. In sixth grade, I won an award for writing and illustrating my own book. I won the district award for my grade for that, which was a book called The Sub, which was basically later they would create a TV show called Sequest, which was basically like Star Trek underwater, which is exactly what my book was about. So I guess I could have sued them for but
no
anyway,
royalties, huh?
No royalties for me.
God damn.
But I did aerospace, which was great because I love flight and I still have aspirations to get my pilot's license. So I kind of got into that to a certain degree with aerospace engineering. But then I decided by the end of that year, I'm like, the engineering part of it is not my forte. It's not my direction. But what do I really want to do? Well, I have an artistic background and a very active imagination. Plus, I was 12 years old when the original Star Wars came out, which for my generation and for people at that time, it was absolutely life-changing because we had never seen anything like that before. And so I was such a Star Wars geek as I still am. And I said, well, what I'm going to do rather than go into space, what I'm going to do is design space. So I want to be a conceptual artist for Lucasfilm so I could work on a Star Wars movie. And so I found out that most of the artists at that time had gone to the industrial design program at Cal State Long Beach, which is also Southern California and closer to my parents' house. So I basically moved back home and started going to school, commuting to Cal State Long Beach. And I did 2 years of the industrial design program, which greatly enhanced my skills. It really got my art skills up to a level that I was hoping for. But then I got a bit disenfranchised with that particular program and how it was being run and the length of time it would take to finally finish the degree, which I thought was kind of ridiculous for an undergraduate degree. It was going to take me probably about 6 years. And that includes the time I spent with aerospace, but 6 years for a bachelor's degree is kind of excessive to me. And so I had always been thinking about minoring in geography, because at least, in a lot of US colleges, you have that choice where you can major in something, but you can also pick up a minor or two if you want. And I was saying, well, I'd love to minor in geography because I've always loved travel. I love culture. I love maps. And so I had that on my focus. But then after those 2 years of industrial design, it was funny. So I was with a friend and we were in the car with my parents. We were driving up to the Hollywood Bowl to see the annual John Williams concert. So, the great composer John Williams gives a concert at the Hollywood Bowl every summer. So we were going up there to see the concert again. And I don't know why, for some reason we had to pull off the freeway. So we're sitting there and I'm in the car and all of a sudden it hits me like a bolt of lightning. And I remember just saying it out loud to everyone in the car. I said, tomorrow I'm going to go in and I'm going to cancel all my classes and I'm going to change my major to geography. And everyone's looking at me like, what? Where did this come from? Because I hadn't really talked about this with anybody about what I was thinking. And I remember my parents were just like, oh God, not again. It's like aerospace engineering, industrial design, now geography. Okay, just pick something. So and that's exactly what I did. The next day I went in and I canceled all my classes, changed my major, picked up all new classes in geography, and I was now in a completely different discipline. And I think it was the right decision because the next 2 years that it took me to finish my undergraduate degree, I ended up getting straight A's in across all my classes, which never happened to me before academically. And so that was, so I kind of felt like I found my calling. And the great part too, I also got a certificate in cartography, which allowed me to greatly leverage my artistic skills. So that I was able to apply to cartography, so I didn't really let that sit on the side. So plus what I loved about cartography is that it is, and geography in general, but cartography specifically, it is a great mix of both the artistic and design aspects as well as science in real world data and all that. And so I think it was satisfying those two sides of my brain where I had a very creative side, but I also had this interest, which kind of harkens back to the space stuff, kind of hardcore engineering and science. So I found that combination in cartography, and that was pretty satisfying for me. And so basically, I ended up working after I got my degree. I worked for a year as a production cartographer. There's a company called Thomas Brothers Maps that made like these hard copy map guides. It was all prior to Google Maps and all the apps, because of course there were no smartphones back then. But we had these, they were really well known, especially in the western part of the US. The Thomas guides were like everybody used them. Everyone had one in their car. So I worked for that company for a year as a production cartographer, which was fun. It was being able to use my craft, but at the same time, I'm like, this is not satisfying enough. I don't see myself doing this kind of job for the rest of my life, which is what inspired me to go pursue graduate school. So I applied to a few graduate schools, 2 in California and 1 in Washington State, the University of Washington in Seattle. And it was the latter was the one who accepted me first. And not only did they accept me, but they called me on my birthday, whether they realized it or not, but they called me on my birthday and offered me a full 2-year teaching assistantship to go to grad school in Seattle. And I was like instantly like, yes, I'm there. Absolutely. I want to get out of Southern California so bad. I know a lot of people, they'll think about Southern California like, oh, it's like so beautiful. It's got beaches and it's sunny all the time and blah, blah, blah. I'm like, yeah, but if you grow up there, it's really boring. I found it really boring. It's just the same. We have a running joke that the weather is either fair and hot or fair and warm. And that's it for the rest of the whole year. So that was really fun. That was an opportunity for me to, move to a completely different place, which kind of excited that discovery aspect that I had as a kid with all those road trips. That I'm as an adult moving to a new place, completely new environment, and I get to kind of learn the ropes of an entirely new area. I'd visited Seattle before, but just once before, and so I didn't really know it that well. But it was great. I mean, it was really, it really kind of tapped into a part of my brain, which I'm sure we'll probably talk about later, but it's that sense of discovery that was so cool. And so I did my master's work, and that took about 2 years. And the topic that I chose, which I think is relevant, is I chose to write about virtual reality. And the reason I chose to write about VR is because one day I was on campus, walking across campus, just going wherever I was going. And I just happened to see this group of people who were moving some equipment into this little tiny building next to one of the engineering buildings. And I just happened to say, hey, what's going on? And they said, oh, we're setting up a virtual reality lab. You want to check it out? And that was the first time I'd ever heard that term before. And I'm
And
like,
which year was that?
that was 1990, early
Okay.
1990s when this happened. And because I started grad school in late 1989 is when I moved to Seattle. So in early 1990, they were setting up this lab. And of course, back then, VR was just barely even working. It was, it was making front page news on some, news magazines and stuff because of Jaron Lanier and all the talk about virtual reality and the promise of it. But for the most part, the technology was super rough around the edges. But the reason this group got started was because Thomas Furness, who created heads-up displays and did all the pioneering VR work in the U.S. Air Force, he retired from the Air Force and decided to become a professor and set up this lab at the University of Washington, which was called the Human Interface Technology Lab, which is still there to this day. And I still know Tom very well. We're still good friends. We actually serve on a board together, the Girls STEAM Institute. So that's been really fun. But he was the one who was encouraging me after I had met his team and I kind of had a better understanding what the virtual world's technology was all about. He was the one encouraging me to say, hey, if you should think about, doing your master's thesis about this. And so I did give it some serious thought. And I eventually said, yeah, okay, I think this is what I want to do. Because I was kind of groping for what am I going to write about for my master's thesis. Of course, when you're in a grad school, usually you've got different professors in the department who are wanting you to write something related to their area of interest. And so that was going on too. I had professors, especially the ones I was a teaching assistant for, who were like, why don't you write about this sewage problem in the Tacoma Bay? Why don't you write about, and I'm just like, that's not very interesting to me. So I wanted something that was really interesting and fascinating. And for me, again, it's kind of that bringing together the creative and the technology part of it. And I thought VR was very much in that realm. And so I said, no, I want to do it about VR. So I wrote up a proposal about it. And I'll never forget, I went to my thesis committee and I suggested it to them. And two of the professors said, basically, they said, no, you're not doing that because that's video games. And of course, both of them realize what I've been doing for the last 30 years in my career. But yeah, at the time they're like, no, that's just video games. We don't want you working on that. But I was relentless. I just said, nope, that's it. I'm either writing about that or I'm going to probably switch majors. And said, okay, fine, whatever.
Nice. No compromise.
Because I honestly, the back of my mind, I was thinking, it'd be kind of fun to do a history degree as well. But this is where it kind of taps into, I just have this insatiable curiosity about everything. And, I even remember mentioning to my parents at one point, I said, hey, I'm thinking about, I could change from geography to history or entomology because insects have always been fascinating too. And they were like, I'll never forget. They're like, why don't you just finish the degree you're working on and then you can decide what to do after that. But for now, why don't you just wrap this up because you're really close and move on? And it's probably some of the better advice my parents had given me.
Yeah, not the worst advice, huh? Sometimes to finish something up. Yeah.
Yeah, because you do run that risk of becoming a perpetual student, and I knew some of those in grad school, people who were in their 30s or 40s who just could not seem to escape the academic environment. But
that's where the Steve Buscemi skateboard memes come from. How do you do, fellow children?
Exactly. Yeah. But I kind of understood their mentality where it's like you have that interest in just constantly learning. And I get that. But so I wrote the master's thesis and then around the time after I finished, I couldn't find work easily because what do you do with a master's degree in geography? But that wasn't my concern when I got the degree. I didn't get the degree because I was looking for a specific job. I got it because I thought it would be really cool. And it was pursuing, it's an intellectual pursuit for me. But then in late 91, because I finished in June of 91, my master's degree, I started my PhD program. And then around the time I started it is when Microsoft calls the geography department and they said, hey, we're looking for somebody to help us build this product that we're working on. So I went over and I interviewed for the position. And one of my fellow grad students also went over and interviewed. And what it turns out is that was Microsoft creating Encarta Encyclopedia. So they were working on the Encarta Encyclopedia project, which was to become like the world's most popular encyclopedia until Wikipedia eventually showed up online. But for a while, Encarta was like the thing. That was like the main resource. And the reason is because Microsoft bundled it with a lot of the Windows software packages they had. So basically, you buy a Windows PC and you're getting Encarta as part of it. And so I've met so many people. When I tell them I worked on Encarta, they're like, "Oh my God, I used that in school. I can remember that. Oh my God." I'm like, "Yeah, I know. It was 30 years ago." when
I just
it
had
was.
flashbacks, I was
Yeah,
like,
same.
Encarta. That's a name I haven't heard for a long time.
Exactly. So I did not get that full-time position, but my colleague did. And then right after he started in early 1992, he calls me up and he's like, "I desperately need your help because we need to make like 500 maps in 6 months." And I was like, "Oh, okay, yeah." So I had at that point been recently married and I was a starving grad student. So I'm just like, yeah, I could use the money. And plus it just sounds fascinating, to make some maps for Microsoft. So I went there on a 6-month contract to make these maps, which we did. And we basically had a 2-person production line where my colleague Whit was basically, getting all the data, the boundary data and everything. And then he'd throw it over to me and I would do all the design work and actually create the map itself. And these were all bitmaps. These were nothing fancy. These were like static bitmaps back in those days that were part of the encyclopedia. But so we got that done, and then they basically renewed my contract right away. And they said, "Well, now we need you to help us with this stuff over here." I'm like, "Sure, why not? I'll do that too." And then they just kept renewing the contract because Whit went on to start the preliminary work on what would become Encarta World Atlas, which was the first vector-based atlas program, which was long before Google Earth ever showed up. So he started on that project, which I would also end up helping on that too. But then I became the cartography lead for Encarta. And so I was basically managing all the cartography for that product as what we call a permatemp, because I was not a full-time employee. So I did that for 3.5 years. And I eventually had to put my PhD program on hold because I was just too busy. I was effectively working full-time at Microsoft, but as a contractor, and I was loving the work. I thought it was just super fun to do this kind of work. And so then I basically got to a point after about 3 years where I went to my manager and I said, "Look, I see people getting headcount around here all the time, and I kind of wonder why I'm not. So either put up or shut up. Find me a headcount, or I'm just going to leave and go back and just work on my PhD." And so amazingly, literally overnight, they found a headcount. Imagine that. So, which pissed me off even more because now I'm like, you guys could have done this at any time over the last 3 years. You could have done this, and yet you kind of strung me along as a permatemp. So that was kind of frustrating. But anyway, they said that, okay, what had happened is that by that point, this was in 1995, a new business unit had been created at Microsoft called the Geography Business Unit. And so that was in charge of doing all of the mapping products for Microsoft, including the maps for Encarta Encyclopedia, the maps for Encarta World Atlas. And then the engine that was being developed for Encarta World Atlas would also become the engine to drive a product called Streets and Trips, which was like a car trip planning software. And then they also had a program called MapPoint, which was kind of a statistical mapping software that Microsoft eventually created. And so I was in the Geography Business Unit now, and they said, "We really need somebody to help us navigate all the complexities around the geopolitical representation on the maps. Like, how do we show Taiwan? How do we show Kashmir? How do we show Western Sahara? And all of these other disputed areas around the world that can get us in big trouble with different governments." And luckily, this is something that was exactly up my alley. It's something that I studied in school and I was actually pretty proficient at because I basically absorbed a lot of that knowledge and kept track of a lot of those disputes around the world. So they basically said, "Write your job description and we'll just hire you into the job." And I'm like, "Okay, great. That's easy." So that's exactly what they did. And so I was now a geopolitical specialist at Microsoft. That was the first of its kind at Microsoft.
Very brief interruption. What year are we in? How old are you
Now
at this
we're
time?
we're in late 1995.
Okay. Oh,
So,
yeah. Okay. And you are, if not to be impolite about your
no,
age, it's just always curious to me.
no. So in 1995, I am 30 years old.
Okay.
Yeah. So I turned 30 earlier that year because I am currently 58, and I have no worries about saying what my age is. So
Nice. I'm
uh,
31 now.
okay.
I'm amazed. Like I'm just in your story, but just to get the biography parts right, it's always good for me to get a little bit of timing. Sorry
Yeah,
for the interruption.
no, not at all. I think it's good to kind of give a sense of where was I at in my life at that
Yeah.
point, you know? And so yeah, I was 30 years old when I got that position at Microsoft. So then, as I was doing that job, which thought was really fun, I started getting questions from all around the company from different people who discovered that I existed as, there's a real geographer working here. And so what
Wow.
happened is they started sending me questions from like all over the company. Like, is this gesture okay? Is it okay to use this flag? Is this color okay to use in this culture? I mean, all these kind of random questions that we actually put under an alias that we called Dr. Ware. So it was Dr. Ware at Microsoft.com was the internal alias for people to send random geography questions.
And that was you, Dr.
And that
Ware?
was me. I was Dr. Ware. So even though I never finished my PhD, I was unofficially sort of a doctor within Microsoft. Um, so yeah, I got, and I actually at one point I had my name on my door, but then underneath it I had to make another nameplate that said Dr. Ware. So I had two nameplates on my door. So that was kind of fun. I still have that
So
somewhere in my storage.
fun.
So I started getting all these random questions. Which was starting to snowball though. There was getting more and more questions like that. So I obviously saw that there was a need for this kind of knowledge within the company, or people thought it was useful, but I had to focus on the geography products. That's why I was there. So that was my main job.
Just one thing, because like I'm always like the maybe stupid question guy, but also always come up with stuff to annoy my coworkers with.
Yeah.
Like how random were these like requests? Was it always necessary information, or did it at some point also, when you said it snowballed, like did people ask you, hey Kate, by the way, like where's Lithuania? And you were like, well, Europe, like that's small.
Yeah,
That's small piece.
we did sometimes get questions like that, in which case I'm like, you know what? There's a great product called Encarta World Atlas that will tell you that. And I actually would reply with that answer because I'm like, your own company makes a product that helps you with that kind of knowledge. So yeah, to be a bit of a smart ass, but I'm just like, really? I'm like, really, you need to ask me that question? So
I would have liked to see that, like that inquiry form of like your backlog of like geography questions. Like, it must be amazing.
Yeah, it was quite extensive. So what happened then is, to just fast forward a little bit, we get into 1997. And we had this big incident happen, which was on, I remember the date specifically. It was August 6th, 1997, when we got this huge backlash episode from the South Korean government because one of the boundaries in Encarta World Atlas was incorrect. To give a little bit of context, up on the Chinese-North Korean border, there's a lake called Cheonji, and it is like a crater lake. And so around the rim of the crater, the highest point on that rim is called Bokdusan. Now, Bokdusan is a sacred place for all Korean people. And it's actually one of the few places where North Korea allows some tourism from the south, so people could go visit Bokdusan. And you may have seen in the past where Kim Jong-un, he is on his white horse and he's riding up in the mountains. And they posted a video of him a few years ago. Well, he was at Bokdusan. That's where he was, because he was kind of saying, look at our amazing heritage, because it's a sacred place to all the Korean people. Well, because of the boundary data that we had, which was from the US government, which was incorrect, we actually showed the entire lake and Bokdusan were in China, not bisected by the boundary with Baekdusan on the Korean side. So we made a huge mistake there. We quickly had to scramble. I had to do all the research, coordinating with our Chinese office and our South Korean office to determine where the boundary actually ran. And I was able to get the maps to show it. That was not easy, especially to get North Korean maps through our South Korean office. But eventually I was able to confirm what the boundary actually was based on Chinese and North Korean sources and confirm.
And were they like, I assume that is kind of like, maybe was there a disagreement about that in any way? Because if you involve China, sometimes there are disagreements about where the boundaries end.
There's a lot of disagreements there. But in this particular case, what I saw China and North Korea, the two countries who are party to this area, they are showing the same boundary. They're showing the lake being bisected by the boundary. And so I took that as like, well, that means that is the boundary because the two parties agree. And the problem, and it kind of speaks to a deeper problem, is that the US data that we had, which was free data because it's made by the US government. So the problem is that data that we had from the US government was outdated and incorrect. Well, why was it incorrect and outdated? Well, if you're the US government, do you trust Chinese and North Korean sources very much? You probably don't. Or you're probably not really quick to update your map based on what they said. So even if they came to a valid agreement and established their border, you could see how the politics of the U.S. might make the U.S. more reluctant to actually, believe it. And so that's a whole nother part of the process of how do you get cartographic data and how do you confirm what is quote ground truth when you're trying to make a map. And so it is complicated stuff. But anyway, we fixed the map, but when we fixed that one issue, which was front page news in South Korea, by the way, because Microsoft offends, the Korean people. Thank God we had no social media back then, though. Yeah. But that becomes a problem later. But so we fixed it. But then when we did that, the Korean Ministry of Information went through all of Encarta encyclopedia, and they found all of their quote incorrections. Things that they felt were inaccurate or needed, clarification or whatever. Now that's based on their perspective of history and their perspective of geography, not all of which is in agreement outside of Korea. So we changed a few things, but for the most part, we fixed that boundary and we were done. So we're like, okay, thank goodness. That was a huge mess. So then what happens? 3 months later, the very first Age of Empires came out. And one of the scenarios in Age of Empires had dealt with a part of Korean history, the Chosun Empire and the Japanese invasion of the Korean Peninsula back in the Middle Ages. Well, you can imagine what happened then is that the South Korean government, they saw that scenario, and that was one of the things they had flagged in their feedback about Encarta. So they saw it, and they were instantly just freaked out because they're like, we just told you about all this stuff to fix just a few months ago, and now you have this product come out and it has the same problem as before. So why are you not listening to us? Now, the thing they don't understand, of course, is that in a large company like Microsoft, which has these huge silos of product development, Encarta was made in Redmond, in the Seattle area. Age of Empires was made in Dallas by Ensemble Studios, and those two groups have no reason to talk to each other. There's no logical reason for them to ever communicate, really. I mean, because they're two completely different products and completely different teams. And so, but that was the problem.
To the outside, it looks like it's all Microsoft.
Exactly, and that's exactly what the South Korean government saw it that way. They're saying, you're all Microsoft. Why is this a problem? Well, again, they don't understand the internal mechanics of how all this works. But it did give me the idea. It gave me this kind of light bulb over my head where I immediately wrote up a proposal for what I would call the Microsoft Office of International Affairs. That's what I originally called this proposal. And, which, several of my colleagues said, that's a bit grandiose. You may want to tone that down. But
so cool though.
But I stuck with it at first. I'm like, no, I like the name because it kind of says what it is. but one of the reasons they didn't like it is because LCA, which is like a big group at Microsoft, it's legal and corporate affairs. And so if you call it international affairs, which kind of dovetails into corporate affairs, the LCA people get pissed off, and you don't want to piss off the lawyers. So yeah. So eventually that's why the name of the team became Geopolitical Strategy, which is very clear on exactly what we're doing. But what happened is I wrote the proposal and I'm like, okay, I think this needs to exist. And I went to some of the people I worked with frequently and I said, what do you think of this idea? And they're like, oh, absolutely. We need this. We need this really bad, because what we had seen in this example with Korea is this massive risk exposure where you have these kind of like geopolitical and cultural issues that nobody is checking. Localization's focused on language quality and translation. They're not looking for these kinds of things. Legal is not really looking for these things because legal is looking for legal issues, which many of these are not specifically legal, but they could be eventually. But so nobody was really focusing on this stuff, and yet it was a huge risk issue, because after that 1-2 punch in South Korea with Encarta World Atlas and Age of Empires, we had the South Korean government saying things like, maybe we should just suspend Microsoft's business here until you guys get this right. And that's serious. Now, to have one product disrupted, that's one thing. It happens. But to have the entire company look under with that kind of scrutiny, that's when like people like Bill Gates gets involved, you know? And so it becomes a really serious issue for the company.
And this was all around Age of Empires 1. Good old
yes,
AoE.
Absolutely.
Damn. Amazing. Love it.
Which I did work on. I worked on a little bit, but I was not involved in that specific scenario. So I wrote up the proposal and I'm like, okay, how do I get this done? Well, I need to talk to VPs, vice presidents, like go high up on the chain across the company. So I went to my own VP first and I did a pitch and like rejected. And I'm like, okay, well, it's like, yeah, it's a cool idea, but yeah, I don't think we really need this. So I ended up over 7 months. I went to 5 different VPs. I was relentless. I did not give up. I kept improving my pitch, but I was not giving up because I knew I had an idea. Maybe it's partly just arrogance on my part, but I really felt strongly that this company needs this. And without this, this is going to be a big problem in the future. And so I just kept going and going and going. So I went through 4 VPs, all of whom rejected me. And just as a side note, all of them are from the US. And then I got to the last VP who I connected with him through a colleague of mine who was running a group called International Product Services. And so he suggested, why don't you talk to my VP, Paul Moritz? Paul is from South Africa, and I think Paul will understand what you're trying to do here. So I had the meeting with Paul, which was April 7th, 1998. Never forget, because that's the day the geopolitical strategy team was born, because I went into Paul's office, I did my pitch. First question he said to me was, I thought we're doing this already. I'm like, no, that's why I'm here. And so within 5 minutes, he approved my proposal. And within a week, I was in a new building with a new title, with 3 people working for me. And I'm sitting there. I'll never forget going in that Monday morning. I'm like, now what the hell do I do?
Got the job. What do we do?
It's like, I mean, I guess part of my brain never expected them to actually say yes to me. I was hoping, because I was persistent, so I was hoping they would say yes. But then when they actually said yes, I'm like, oh shit, now what?
No.
So, but then that started the process of essentially what my goal was, as I wrote out in that original proposal, was to institutionalize the company's thinking around geopolitical and cultural accountability. So how do they become accountable for these issues and make sure that we're not shipping products that might be a problem, or not meet local expectations, or cross a line with a specific government? And so that was my mission. And so I basically started building up a whole strategy for how we were going to do that. A lot of the strategy meant that we were going to evangelize like crazy. So I went on basically a constant speaking tour to every group at Microsoft who would listen to me, different product groups, different divisions. I traveled to different subsidiaries because I knew that for me to be successful, I really had to have the subsidiaries on my side. And that was easy because as I started learning, when I talked to them, They had so many complaints about Redmond not listening to them about local issues. Many complaints. They're like, so I said, look, I can be your voice at headquarters because I am at headquarters. So if you're not getting through to like the Office team or the Windows team or to somebody else, you can contact me and I can literally walk over to that person's office and confront them directly about this and help you out. And that's exactly what I did many times in that role. But my mandate though was across the entire company, which was crazy. So I was working across every product you can imagine, which included all the games. And that's where it got really interesting because I did my first overture.
Can we
Go ahead.
pause for a moment? Because this is really crazy. Like I just got like goosebumps because you're like now a crazy switchboard operator in Microsoft. I mean,
Yes.
what the hell? That's amazing. and what a journey, and I mean, it's a hell of a story, kid.
Yeah, it's in hindsight, yeah, it's pretty bizarre. I think back, I'm like, sometimes I think back and I'm like, how the hell did I do that? How did I do that? It's just like, it sounds like so much work.
I mean, you'd have to ask the person who was doing the work. I mean,
yeah,
we could.
But that's my 58-year-old mind thinking about talking to my 33-year-old self, which is how old I was when I created the geopolitical strategy team. So I'm just like, it was a different stage of life. But
you were going hard and fast, huh? I mean, you were clearly. I mean, what I'm hearing is you enjoyed the work from the time you started doing maps at the Popular Maps thing.
Yes.
And then that enjoyment never stopped, and you clearly had some sort of entrepreneurial mind, and then you seem very strong-willed to me, and I guess, and somehow you moved through. Like,
well,
it seemed.
I think so. I mean, to be quite honest, I think especially this came through a lot of hindsight, but I am very mission driven. Very mission driven. So when I see a mission to be accomplished, I am all over it. And I think that's really how that is what drives me. And that's what pushes me forward in an almost just relentless way.
Yeah.
And that would also prove true later when I, as we might discuss, when I ran IGDA and Global Game Jam. But it was really about being mission driven. What is the mission? The accountability, the institutionalization, that's the mission. No matter what it takes, no matter how long it takes, it has to be done. That's what I set out to do. And therefore I'm going to make it happen one way or another. And so that really, for me, when I get into that mission focused mindset, it, like everything else, just becomes inconsequential. It's like, oh, this is challenging. So what? But you're on a mission. You have to accomplish the mission. It's like, it doesn't matter how challenging it is. That's part of the joy of the mission, is the challenge. If it's not challenging, then why am I even doing it?
Would you say that's where it becomes interesting to me, is this mission focus to me is interesting because obviously there's just so many hours in the day. And what I often ask myself about people where I feel like they get so much done, obviously comparing myself to other people, and then hearing this, how do you like pack that much time within a day to accomplish that? Where do you get the motivation? But then on the other hand, do you think that it's all a long game in a way? Like, because you might not get to that point the first time as you went through all those VPs, but maybe your mission then goes over 5 years or however long it may take, but you never lose that large goal out of sight. Do you have any thoughts about that?
Yeah, I think that's a great point to raise, because I think part of it for me is, part of it came from a conscious studying of, through my geography background, I study a lot of cultures, and a lot of cultures have a very different perspective on time compared to a lot of people in the West. especially the US, where it's like drive, drive, drive. You got to get stuff done. All that kind of, the kind of workaholic hyper, all that, which is even, far worse than I find in Europe, where Europe actually is like, well, hey, it's okay to go home and not work for the rest of the day.
Yeah.
Whereas in the US, it's like being a workaholic or working yourself to death is like some kind of weird status symbol, or at least it used to be. I don't think that's quite the case anymore. But back in the 80s and 90s, absolutely it was. But I was looking at it not really from the day-to-day work aspect, but it's more about the perception of time. And I think, a lot of this we learn from a lot of cultures in Asia, where their perspective of time is quite different, where it's like, it is all about the long game. And when we say long game, we're talking like decades, centuries, millennia. It's like we're thinking about how, if we have a mission, if we have something we want to accomplish, it doesn't mean it has to happen within my lifetime. It can happen beyond my life. My job is to be a catalyst to get that moving and to get things moving in the right direction. If somebody else can pick that up after my time, that's great, because that means that initiative has some long-term meaning and it's a net positive for people.
Yes.
So I kind of look at it that way. It's just like, it's not about me. It's not about bringing glory to what I'm going to do, and all of that. It's not really about that. It's like, yeah, I've gotten accolades for my career, which is really nice. And I'm really honored by what I've gotten, but that's never, ever why I've done anything that I've done. I do it because it has to be done. And that is, to me, the mission part. And so I knew, for example, when I was going to start doing this culturalization work at Microsoft, and kind of trying to get the teams to understand what I was trying to convey. So I'll give you an example. So my initial pitch to a lot of the teams was, the reason we're doing this work is to respect who our customers are as human beings and the cultures they come from and the expectations that they have. And that's really why we do this work. And to me, honestly, that is still what drives me today and why I love doing this work. But that argument, especially back in the early 90s, went nowhere. Nobody really, and I won't say it was like, yeah, people on one level of their intellect said, yeah, I totally agree with you. But let's face it, in a business context, especially like a place like Microsoft in those days, that argument goes nowhere. So what argument works? Of course, money. You have to use the money argument. So I had to learn to pivot my language and to understand, okay, well, because I do tend to look at all of these different challenges as cultural challenges. So now I'm dealing with the cultural challenge of within Microsoft, the company culture of Microsoft at that time under Bill Gates and Steve Ballmer, very different than it is now under Satya. And I think it's far better now than it was back then. But, so what do I need to do as a geographer? How do I speak to people of this culture? Well, this culture speaks the language of money and revenue. So then I need to pivot my dialogue to that, which I did. So instead of talking about local, respecting the local customer, blah, 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 even though I would still say that because it's still important to me, the main argument I would use is say, look, the more you adapt your content to make it compatible with these different markets, the more revenue that you can generate. Because basically we are maximizing the reach of the content, and we maximize the reach by adapting the content and considering the geopolitical and cultural implications of what's in the content. And when I pivoted to that argument, the lights went on in their eyes, the light bulbs went on over their heads, and they're like, oh, I totally get why we're doing this now. So,
and the dollar signs appeared in their eyes.
Of
Can't
course.
forget that.
Of
Yes,
course.
indeed.
So
Do you feel like that kind of longevity that is actually needed for change like this? Because I also find it boring at some point to deal with day-to-day stuff. I always want to get to bigger goals. I assume, or I think that most of us want to not be caught in their like daily routine, but want to have something that makes their job more interesting, brings together people, changes things on a larger scale, especially in this creative industry. Let's call it like that as an overarching term. Mm-hmm. But do you think people are given that time? Like let's say games industry, like there's so many, like you have to in the AAA space, you have to put out a game once a year. You have to have those updates. You have to pivot to whatever is the latest trend. So those overarching goals, to me, are hardly compatible with what our industry actually desires of people, and this like startup and fast paced kind of movement. How do you reconcile this kind of moving forward important topics versus having to present something rather yesterday than
Yeah.
tomorrow?
That's a great point to bring up, because I think you've hit the issue squarely in the center, is that you have that juxtaposition of challenges that we have as an industry, whether it's in a company or in a team or as a broader industry. We have challenges that exist that are not going to be solved by any one actor, not by one company, not by one employee, I mean, et cetera, et cetera. And they are certainly not going to be solved quickly. And so then how do we handle that kind of stuff? Well, the problem is that we as human beings, and I want to say, especially, even though I don't want to broad brush my comment, but it tends to be more of a Western mindset, is that we are problem solvers, that it needs to be solved now. We're going to,
how do we disrupt this industry if we don't have
Yeah, so it's like, we are going to put together a team, and we're going to give a budget to the team, and they're going to be a disruptor, and they're going to figure out this problem, and then within a year or two, they're going to come back with our solution, and then they're going to fix the problem. It doesn't work that way. It just doesn't, unless it's a very specific technical issue. The thing, like, I'll give you an example. So, the issue of diversity and inclusion in the game industry, very big topic about which many, many comments have been made and books have been written and dialogues. And I've been on countless panels and been at women's lunches at game events and all of that stuff. We're all talking about diversity and inclusion and how important it is. And I think now in this day and age, everyone recognizes that, yes, it is important. Yes, it is critical. The problem that I have seen is that there's too many groups that want to be the one to solve it. And that, I think, is the problem. It's like, there's that idea that only one group will really bring enlightenment to the industry, or one effort. Although, I think that's changed a bit now. We recognize there's a lot of great organizations throughout the game industry around the world that are trying to push the issue forward and make progress on it. But we have to recognize as an industry that this is not something that's going to happen overnight. And it's the kind of thing that happens by individual decisions that happen all the way down the chain. There is no giant industry body making these decisions. There's nobody shepherding this from on high, like the UN of games or something. There isn't. Yeah. So what has to happen is basically there's like the collective realization that this is important, but then there's the specific operationalization of it into every company and into every hiring decision, every job description that's written, every kind of practice that's done at every company throughout the industry. It has to be so systemic. But that takes time. It takes a long time, because you're talking about cultural change. And that's the problem. You're talking about a whole cultural shift and a mindset that needs to be changed, which I do believe it's changing. And I do think it's changing for the better. But I mean, I've been in this industry for 30 years. And is it better now than it was 30 years ago? Oh, hell yeah, way better. But is it where it should be? Oh, hell no. We're not there yet.
Will it ever? This is something, because I wrote this down because that's obviously very interesting to me, for somebody who's been in the industry for so long. And then also the fact that you are a woman. But for me, it's always, of course, I'm a white guy. To me, everything should come easy. The world was made for myself. That's what I'm told on the internet.
Yeah.
So, but talking to inspirational people like you, who have been there for so long, and I wrote down this just as a note, like, not that they were different people, for the audience, not to understand me wrong, but like, women then and now was the sentence I just scribbled down, in terms of like, what I want to get from you is this: what do you feel like in terms of what did it cost you back 20, 25 years ago to get to a point of recognition, to be seen amongst your peers, versus where do you think we are now, versus will this ever be solved, or when do you think this will be in a state where it is okay?
Yeah, it's that's a great question. I mean, I wish I had a clear answer for it. I mean, to answer first the latter part of what you just asked, I think that it's just going to be a continually evolving process where what it eventually comes down to is the talent pool that's available, and is the talent pool diverse. And
Yeah.
that's really what it comes down to. So who are the people who are coming into the game industry? And we are seeing greater diversity in school programs. We are seeing it, especially on an international scale. I mean, that's the thing that I find fascinating, is that some of the issues, like, for example, around gender diversity, are more of an issue in the West than they are in other parts of the world. Because in other parts of the world, they don't have the luxury of picking and choosing. They are at a talent deficit. So they will, if they have somebody who is capable of doing the work, it doesn't matter who they are, what they look like, what their gender is like, you're hired, you're in, because we need you. And, we don't want to have to import talent to get this work done. And so there's a completely different socioeconomic context there that drives the oversight, or I should say, that overlooks that whole diversity question, whereas you still have these arguments happening in a lot of Western countries where it's like, well, the hiring manager has an unconscious bias towards not hiring women, et cetera, which happens. I mean, it happens all the time. So it's like, is that going to go away quickly? It's like, no, I don't think it's going to go away quickly, because that you're talking not just obviously about game industry behavior or business behavior. You're talking about human behavior.
Yeah.
And that's the gist of it. I mean, you can't change human behavior quickly, but
And can I? Sorry. Please finish.
No, go ahead.
I just had a little rattle in my brain, and it was the combination of something in the last 10 minutes when you said, Kate, that you were working for decades and almost for centuries and not for decades, right? You're planting a tree that you might not see grow, potentially. And we're talking about rapid change. Something is coming to mind that I've been thinking a lot about, and I think it fits here. I think right now, our generation, like, sorry, Florian and mine.
Yeah, no, I get
it. We have this. We grew up with the internet at our fingertips.
Yes,
and I grew up with coming from the countryside as a bit of an introverted nerd, turning into a somewhat suave real life game player with a lot of self-help and a lot of knowledge that became available explosively relative to previously. Just like 1,000,001 things now were suddenly available explosively, right? Like, including the topics we're talking about now. Because previously, not to say that it was good, but they were just under covers, under wraps. They were not transparent. We're now in an age of transparency and of like high octane information exchange everywhere. What the hell am I saying? I think it sometimes gives people an illusion, maybe especially young people, that we now have to fix everything. I know I feel like this. We have to fix everything in our lifetime. And I have to get married. I have to have children. I have to fix my generational trauma. And we have to fix the games industry in all verticals, in all aspects. While in the next, I'll check my watch, 60 years that I might have, right? Depending on my party behavior. Okay, but that's nuts, because suddenly I'm not just concerned like a previous generation maybe with finding a good job and building a good household and raising 2-3 decent children, but I'm here with this whole other stuff, and the whole other stuff is great. It's like amazing. We have a potential for some real change in the world on all sorts of metrics, but that's the last 10 max 20 years.
Yeah.
So I think we're in a time where the long game that apparently you recognized amazingly early, And certainly not everyone's playing long games. And I think it's one of the best virtues we can have. A genuine, egoless, this is not about me, this is about the thing. Let me give it my all long game attitude to pass it on to the other generations, to say maybe my work is done in 500 years and I can die happily. I think this is some sort of cheat code also, even though it's like this crazy time horizon, to relax a little bit. I'm thinking I can probably let some things go that I think I should get done in my lifetime, like, I don't know, getting super buff or ripped. I'm sometimes I think I want to try. Sometimes I think maybe I'll create a good enough environment that I didn't have for my children, so they can do it. So to think generationally, to think long gamey, I think is like such an important thing, especially right now where we have like 100 things that we could do and work on, and we know that without focus we don't get nothing done.
Yeah, I completely agree, and I think that's really. It's hard to take the long game approach because you have to take your ego out of it, which is really tough for us to do today. Because I mean, honestly, the social media environments that we live in now are optimized for narcissism. They are. I mean, I'm just going to say it. They're optimized to give us dopamine hits and to help us see, basically feel loved, feel liked. I know many people around me who have gone into depression because they didn't get enough responses on a social media post or something like that. And I'm not saying this as a joke. I'm saying they genuinely had a depressive episode because of it, because their expectations were different. And that really troubles me. Because maybe it is having that perspective of having come from a world where there were no computers when I was a kid. I mean, there was a giant ENIAC in a lab somewhere, but we had no personal computers. I mean, I remember even when the first electronic calculators became publicly cheap enough for us to buy, it's just like all of these things being there from that analog to digital transition in the early stages of my life, I think gave me a perspective and I guess an appreciation of what technology means and what role it plays in our lives. And I mean, as I said, I fully embrace technology. I'm a huge tech geek. It's why I wrote my master's thesis on VR. It's why, I'm an early adopter of a lot of technologies, but I also keep an arm's distance a bit from it because it's like, I also know what role it can and can't play in my life. And, it enables so many fantastic, amazing things. And at the same time, it can be a huge separator of us from the rest of humanity in many ways. And so I think, having that perspective of the long game is really tough because we are not trained today, especially younger people are not trained to think that way. Because you are exactly right. We live in an era where everything is in the moment. TikTok, Instagram, all this other stuff, the way that it's been packaged is that it is an instantly consumable object that you will consume now, and you will binge on it, and you will watch many of these, and then in 2 hours, you'll realize that 2 hours have passed. And what have I been doing sitting here? Hey, I'm part of that too. I get on my little binges now every once in a while. I'm not saying I'm above the technology. I'm not trying to be arrogant. I'm a human being as well. I've been down the Wikipedia rabbit hole for half a day or more, where I'm just like article to article to article. Cause I'm just like, and then I realize, oh crap, I should have finished that client project. So
modern of you. Back in the day, the kids were on these Encarta binges, Kate.
Yeah, those damn Encartas. Yeah, but I think it's important because having that longer perspective, you have to realize, and you really have to come to peace with the fact that it's rare that a single person will change the world. But I say that knowing that most of the major movements in human history were started by a single person. Political movements, social movements, religious movements were started by a single person. So the potential is always there. And so that's where I would never tell somebody not to try, because I think if you have that drive and that interest to make change truly happen, then you should absolutely grab onto it and do it. But for most people, it's not going to be an individual effort. It's something that is collective, because that's usually how change happens. Unless you're like an incredibly charismatic person, you're a Martin Luther King, or you're, JFK or one of these other amazing figures throughout history, those are very rare in human history. They come along generationally, and which is great. It's special that we see people like that and give us an example of something to aspire to. But beyond that, for most of us who I would say are quote normal human beings, our job then is to what? I would say that you look at the entirety of all the problems, which again, I think the focus of the internet today is that it gives us, like you said, all of this information all at once. I mean, every morning I check the news sites, I kind of keep up on what's going on in the world, and it's just a fire hose in your face every morning. Here's all the problems going on right now. And these are only
everything
the ones
everywhere all at once.
Exactly.
Is that what you're saying? Yeah.
Exactly. And so you have to, how do I cope with that? Well, for me in my job, I have to know that stuff. So and being just the curious person I am, I just drink it up. I love it. I want more information. The more, the better. But then it comes down to what can I actually do today? If I want to make change happen, the way that I approach it and the way I've told many people as I've mentored many people around how do you become a catalyst for change, whether it's in your industry or your workplace or whatever it is, my perspective is that you have to pick the corner that is most concerning to you, the corner of your little universe that concerns you the most, the issue that burns in you the most, the one that makes you upset, the one that drives you. Having that long perspective, and realizing that, what you have to do to really, if you want to feel like you can make change happen, is select the piece of change that is most important to you, that's immediately around you, and do your best to make change happen for that issue. Because let's face it, it's rare or impossible for most individuals to change all of the problems in the world. And the more you focus on all of those problems, the more daunting it seems. So it's like, pick a problem that is important to you and just try and make change happen with it. And that's really, to me, what it's all about. And that's really kind of what drove my interest when I ended up leaving Microsoft in 2005. And the reason I left, to be honest, just to kind of conclude the Microsoft story, the reason I left is because in 2004, I had been negotiating with the Worldwide Operations Group within Microsoft, who controls what is called the Master Checklist. And the Master Checklist is something that every single Microsoft product must adhere to in order to release its product. It doesn't matter if it's a hard copy or digital or anything. And so what I was able to do in negotiation with them is get a line item into the Master Checklist that had a line about geopolitical and cultural issues and accountability over those issues. So basically, if the product did not address those issues, then they could not ship. And we had, guidelines on how they could address those issues and show that they had. And so for me, once I got that established in 2004, that was exactly the institutionalization of this accountability that I was hoping for 7 years earlier when I created the geopolitical strategy team. And that was pretty much when I decided that I think my job here is done. There's nothing more I can do here. I got the company to this point, and I established this team, I established this accountability, and now it's going to be here forever because of this line item in the master checklist. And I'd done a tremendous amount of evangelization around the company. And by that point, I had helped the games team finally get on board with what I wanted them to do. And that's a whole nother story about how that happened. It was not easy. Because both Robbie Bach, who was the senior VP over games at the time, and Shane Kim were kind of resistant to what I was, quote, selling them. They're like, oh, well, games are edgy and cool. We don't really need what you're selling here. And I'm like, yeah, but you're Microsoft. So we still have a responsibility to ship stuff that is not going to get us in trouble. And they went through a huge problem with a game called Kakadu Chojin back in 2003, early 2004, because it had an audio file from the Quran in the game. And I'm not going to go into all the details because it would take a long time to describe it, maybe for another time. But basically what happened is that incident caused the game to get a lot of negative backlash in the Middle East, North Africa region. And so we had to recall the game. and fix it and all this stuff. I had to go to Riyadh and sit before the religious council of the Saudi government and basically apologize on behalf of Microsoft for what happened. And this was and I did that right as the second Gulf War was starting, just, several hundred miles away. So that was exciting. But so basically that one incident, though, is what got the games division to wake up and realize that this is important, because 2 weeks after I got back from that trip, Robbie called me up and said, "Hey, you know that stuff you've been telling us to do for a couple of years? I think we should do that on all our games." I'm like, "You're brilliant. No wonder you're a senior VP. I can see it." No, I loved working with him. I loved him and Shane and Ed Fries and all the folks there. They were great to work with, and I still know them all. But yeah, it was frustrating a little bit at times. But anyway, so we created what I called a geopolitical quality review process on all the games at Microsoft, which is why I ended up working on pretty much all the games at Microsoft while I was there. The Halos and Fables and Age of Empires and Forza and basically anything you can imagine on the original Xbox and even the 360 era. And a lot of the PC games, I worked on all of that stuff, which was just the best, which is why when I decided to leave, I said I want to focus specifically on games when I leave the company and become a consultant. So when I left in 2005, created Geogrify, and I left with only 4 months worth of income to pay my bills. So I was kind of really going off the cliff. But that was, because I had Microsoft stock and all that, but I had spent it, my daughter's education and fixing up the house and stuff like that. So, but it was liberating. I'm the kind of person who loves that environment where you're like taking that kind of risk. So it's like you put yourself in a position where for me, it was invigorating that I'm going self-employed. I'm leaving a great job that I created with amazing benefits, with working with amazing people, and yet I'm leaving it. And now I'm becoming self-employed, which I did on April 1st, 2005, April Fool's Day, which I thought was very appropriate. And I actually announced it on April Fool's, where a lot of people thought I was actually joking. Like, "Oh, that's really funny." But I was like, "No, I'm serious." So that was a real challenge. That put me in a position to challenge myself in a way I had not been before, because I had been in 13 years of a comfort zone of working at a place like Microsoft. And now I am out in the world fending for myself, having to build an entirely new business based on my Microsoft experience. And it was tough. I mean, it was, especially for a baseline introvert like myself, to get out there and have to sell yourself, and to pitch what you do and to explain it to people. And even though, I'd had that experience internally at Microsoft, but it was still a lot different to have to do that for myself. But at the same time, I loved it because my success was dependent purely on me, not on anybody else. If I sank or if I swam, it's only because of me. And that was a really exciting feeling to me. I loved the autonomy that came with that. And so, yeah.
That's really inspiring, I think. And I think putting yourself in that position where you said, sink or swim at that point, getting to that realization one way or another really helps a person to understand you must rely on yourself. You can still, there is various degrees to this. You went completely solo, but there's still people in working relationships with their employer where they say, well, I need to fend for myself to get that raise or to get that different position that I earned, whatever. You need to rely on yourself and trust yourself that you are ready for the next step. And I think that's what this really, really showed. Since we could make this probably our longest marathon episode ever, but we don't have that time. And especially we don't want to take up all of your time, which is precious. What I think would be really cool, because you are doing so many things, or you have done so many things, everything, everywhere, all at once again, where I would like to ask you about some of the stations or some of the projects that you work on, and you do a quick description of what the project is and why you chose to interact with that. Because to me, it makes sense.
Sure.
Or how I understand it at this point, or how I see you, is you very clearly choose to interact with a single project or people because you can or you want to. There's no need for you to go after money or whatever. That's not your agenda. So you said, well, you have now Geogrify, which is your own consultancy business where you consult basically the games industry and beyond about these cultural and geographical issues. That's your main gig,
Yeah.
let's say. Yes.
Yes. I would. Yeah,
But
exactly.
then you also are involved in the Global Game Jam. So why do you think,
Yes.
how did you come to that, and why, briefly, I know, but why did you choose to interact or jump on board there?
So basically what happened, just to give a little like broader context for that, is that when I left Microsoft and I knew I wanted to be more active in the game industry, I joined the International Game Developers Association just to interact more, with other developers and just kind of get to know them better and get to know the industry better. And when I did that, when I would go to conferences like GDC or E3 or whatever, I would hang out mainly with localization people because they were kind of similar to what I did, even though they were mainly focused on language. But what happened is that a lot of the loc people I hung out with, they often would just kind of bitch and moan about why nobody cares about localization. And so I said, well, hey, why don't we create a localization special interest group within the IGDA? Because the IGDA has a lot of special interest groups. So I created this special interest group on localization, mainly to give us a focal point to talk with each other, but also to educate non-loc people on why it's important, why what we do is important. And so I basically got that started and created that team and ran the special interest group, which really became a focal point for the localization industry in games. And we also ran the localization summit at GDC for 6 years as a team. And I also helped revive the Seattle IGDA chapter and helped run that as well. And that's why we're talking now 2007 or so is when I got involved. And at this, on the side, I was still doing my consulting work. I picked up Google as a client thanks to a connection with one of my former Microsoft colleagues. So I was doing this amazing work at Google, helping Google Maps and Google Earth, having created their geopolitical team, just like I did at Microsoft. Wow. So that was kind of my anchor client. So I was getting income that way. And so that was an entirely fun project that had nothing to do with games, but it was still just fascinating to work on. But eventually, as I got involved running the LocSig, running IGD Seattle, that's when the IGD approached me in 2012 and basically asked if I'd be interested in being the executive director of the global organization. And at that point, I was very much tuned into the advocacy efforts within the industry, because at that point, I had been working with game developers by that point, at least for 10, 15 years, and I love these people. I love the talent they have, the drive they have, the vision. I just love working with them. They are my group. These are my people. And so, but I also hated how they were being mistreated with crunch time and sexist environments and toxic environments and all the other problems that we've all heard about in different game companies. And I felt that if I ran the IGDA, it would give me a platform on which to try and make change happen across the industry. And that's why I took the job. And the job, as I've described in, various lectures, I did it out of love for the people I work with, because I felt like they're busy doing that. I can take this on and help make this happen, which is why I took that job. And it's the same reason why I eventually did the executive director job at Global Game Jam, because I love the effort. You're talking about this one event that happens every year that brings together people from over 100 countries. It's just such an amazing cross-cultural event that just kind of tickles every geographer bone that I have. I think it's the coolest thing. And so it was a privilege for me to run the Global Game Jam, just like it is to be on the board still, but also run the IGDA. Even though when I ran the IGDA, it was during Gamergate. So because I was a woman in a leadership role in the game industry, I was instantly one of their primary targets. So that was not fun, being basically attacked by them online for over 2 years straight with death threats and harassment and everything. But I respond to that kind of behavior with resilience. It's like, if you're going to push me, I'm going to push you back twice as hard. Because again, it's kind of even goes back to the days of when I was pitching the geopolitical team. It's like, I know I was in the right. I know that I'm on the right side of history with promoting inclusion and diversity in this industry. And I don't care what they say. I'm not going to back down on this point. And so it was really that drive to make things better for the people with whom I work. As well as when I became part of the board of TakeThis.org, which deals with mental health in the game industry, because in my role running the IGDA, when I would travel the world speaking to developers all over the world, one of the most common themes I heard was the mental health impacts of the workplace. And so I felt that that was just a very critical issue that needed to be highlighted, which is why I'm still on the board of Take This as well.
Amazing. Yeah. Thanks for giving us a brief overview over that. One last station or one last project I want to look into, because we had so many notes about Kate's inner geek and your like cosplay things, and just we cannot fit them into this episode. But there's one project that you are running. It is yours. It is your company, which is called Setjetters. Can you tell us a little bit about what you do there and why it is interesting to you?
Yeah, I love talking about it. Setjetters, this came about as a lifelong hobby of mine, which is visiting filming locations. Because having grown up in Southern California, where you are surrounded by tons of filming locations, it was always something that I found really fun to do. You know, you see something on the movie screen or a television screen, and then you go there. And especially if it's something that is meaningful to you, if it's a movie that you really like. And I find that, I guess part of this is the geographer's brain in me, that being in the space really makes that emotional connection you have come alive between the media that you love and the place. And so it's kind of a special feeling when you go there. And so I, like a few years ago, when I was in Tunisia, I visited the original Lars Homestead set where they filmed, Star Wars over 40 years ago. And for me, it was almost like a religious experience. I mean, I was tearing up and I was weak in the knees because I'm like, after all these years, having seen that film at 12 years old, I'm standing in the very place where that film was captured. And it's still there. The little Skywalker hut is still there. And it blows you away. It's just like the connection to the history and the connection to the place is so meaningful. And so I got together with a few other founders, these great people, 3 from film, 1 from tech, and then myself. And we got together at the beginning of right before COVID, actually. But then we really accelerated the effort during COVID to create an app called Setjetters that helps people find filming locations for tourism reasons. And so that's been going along really, really well. And it's just a pure passion project for me, but I absolutely love it. It's just such a cool additional distraction where I get to work on something I really love. It's not, well, there are some game features in it, but it's not explicitly a game. It's not explicitly geography, but it's about essentially, like everything in my life has been about finding confluence. It's a word that I even started using back in high school, where I wanted to see how can I bring my interest in creative media, games, film, all of that, and technology and geography and culture. How can all of these things live together in the same space? And I think that's ultimately what I believe I have found, both through happenstance and through purposeful design of my career path, is I have found that confluence where I get to live in a space where all of these things I enjoy, I get to play with them almost every day. It's not like one is a hobby or whatever. It's like they're all actually part of the work I do every day. And that just brings me a lot of joy.
Amazing. Thank you so much for sharing all of this with us. We will not finish our conversation in this podcast. We do have a long form podcast, but I don't know if there's a podcast that would be long form enough for your stories to be in there. So maybe we will have you as our first returning guest. I would really love it.
Yeah, in
but
favor.
We need to come to an end, and that for us means essential questions. Those have not changed, and they have returned with us. So, Simon.
Yes.
Bring us in.
Indeed. We have to do quick fire in the interest of time. So
that's fine.
Let's see what we got.
Let's go for it.
First question. What inspires you?
I think for me, what inspires me most is discovery. I am about discovery. Any opportunity I get to learn something new, that's really what it's all about for me. It's the being open to discovery, being curious, and so I'm inspired when I have that opportunity. And the more I discover, the more I get to learn. It just reinforces itself over and over again.
What is the purpose of your being?
My purpose at its core is to serve other people. That's what I'm here to do. I remember when I was running IGDA some years back and somebody asked me, what exactly do you do every day? And I thought about it. I'm like, I help people. That's what I do. That's why I'm here. And I honestly feel that at my core, that is why I'm here. And I honestly think that's why most of us are here. It's like we edify ourselves with a career path and family and all the great things that life brings to it. But ultimately, I think if we're not helping each other succeed in those things, then then we're actually failing in some degree. So I feel that the more I can help people, whether it's through my consulting work or just mentoring or whatever I can do, then that's why I'm here.
Amazing. What is a beautiful day to you?
Oh, that's hard. Well, no, it's not hard at all. Beautiful day to me is being somewhere I've never been before, like somewhere around the world, and having a free day to just explore. So, like, for example, here's a beautiful day I had earlier this year. I was in Israel for the Global Game Jam, and the day before I left, I had a free day, and I was in Haifa, up in northern part of Israel. And so I realized that Akko, the city of Akko, or called Akko locally, is just about a 20-minute train ride north of me, and I'd never been there before. Now, at that time, I had just finished doing a review project of Age of Empires 4 with content related to the Crusades and the Saladin campaign in Age of Empires 4, which took place in Akko. And so the whole battle and everything. So I said, I'm going to go. And it was just like a few days earlier. So I got on the train. I had a whole free day to myself, went up to Akko, just had a fantastic time wandering around, no time agenda, no time pressure, just wandering around and kind of thinking about all of that content I'd just seen in the game and that I just took a look at. And now I'm standing in the actual place where the game takes place and getting to experience the real history behind it. And that was just beautiful to me, that when I get that kind of opportunity, that was fantastic.
What a joy. What is the change you want to see in the world?
The biggest change I want to see in the world is the ability for people to see that they can make change happen. And that is a really hard one for a lot of people because, to our earlier conversation, I think a lot of people are daunted by how much change needs to happen. But I think if people realize that they can make change happen, even at a smaller scale, imagine if everybody's doing that at their smaller scale. That's actually how large scale change happens. So the change I would like to see is to see more people embrace the fact that they are an agent for change, or they can be if they want to be.
And how do you contribute to that change that you want to see?
Well, I think in my case, I've shown it many times over. I mean, I've one time I had somebody ask me after I left the IGDA, they asked, what exactly do you do? And I said, I don't know, but that's a great question. So they challenged me. This is somebody I consider to be a mentor. They came and they said, I'm going to be on a trip for 2 weeks. When I get back, I want you to tell me what you are. And like, okay. So, but it was a great challenge because I thought about it. And when they came back, we had this conversation and I figured it out. I said, I am a cultural change catalyst. That's what I do. I basically love seeing a problem that needs to be solved, and I try and be the catalyst for the problem in moving towards a solution. Once I see it on a path to solution, I move on. I don't like being in management or maintenance mode. So just like the team at Microsoft, I got it started, I got it going, but then it got, institutionalized. Once that happened, I don't need to be there anymore. I don't want to do the management part. I just want to be the catalyst to get it started. And so I think that that pretty much summed it up for me. And that's how most of the actions I do on a daily basis, that's pretty much what I do.
That's awesome. Very inspiring. If you would start a new save game in your life right now, what occupation would your new character have?
Oh, that one's easy. There's an occupation I've always wish I could do, but I can't, is to be a film composer.
Whoa.
Because I am a film music geek. I love John Williams and, Bernard Herrmann and Jerry Goldsmith and all these amazing, amazing, talented composers for film over the many decades. And, it's a skill I've always greatly admired. I get so much out of that music. And I always thought that would be so cool to have that ability. But I do have a musical background. I've played various instruments, and the only instrument I can play now is the Scottish bagpipes. But composing is kind of a mystery to me. So I've always thought that would be really cool.
I have to interject very quickly because I think what I was amazed again because I anticipated an answer because the easy way out for you would be to say, well, I always wanted to be an astronaut and never got to be it. So going back to that, but there's no backwards thought in you. You have to move forward. So something that you obviously haven't thought of or haven't achieved yet is the answer. So again, just fascinated by you as a person.
Well, thanks. I would. Hey, let's face it. If I had the opportunity, I'd still go into space in a heartbeat. I would go immediately.
You can start several new save games, no problem.
You have to see it as a generational kind of task. The long game, Kate.
Exactly.
Okay, last essential one from me. In the interest of knowledge transfer or inspiration, do you have books that you often recommend that had a major impact on you that you maybe like to give to people? Top 3 if you'd like.
That's a great question. I think one of them is Dune, Frank Herbert's original Dune. I mean, it is my favorite sci-fi book by far. I've read it many, many times, and I love it for all kinds of reasons. I first read it a very long time ago. I could say easy things like Lord of the Rings. I also read that when I was in 4th grade, and for a while I was reading the trilogy like every year for many years. It just was hugely inspiring to me, as it has been to many other people. There's other books out there. There's like a great a novelization of the life of Miyamoto Musashi, the famous samurai in Japan, and I'm trying to remember who the author was. It's a very well-known book about him, but it's one of the best books I've ever read. I just love the story of Musashi, and it's also been, I think that it's been made into several films as well, but I would have to go back and find the exact author.
IG Yoshikawa?
I think that's the one.
That's the one.
I think so.
Also, no worries. We will put it in the show notes so people can.
Yeah, but it's just, I remember a friend gifted that book to me, and I read it, and I was just like completely and utterly absorbed by the book and the writing. It was just so well done. But I'd say that those are probably the top ones. I mean, there's a lot of other ones I would probably recommend. Like I keep pushing Foundation on people. I love the original Foundation trilogy. Yeah, I was growing up, I was really big into classic sci-fi. In my undergraduate years at Cal State Long Beach, they had somebody had passed away and donated his entire library of paperback sci-fi books to the college library. So when you go into the library, there was an entire room of nothing but sci-fi books. So basically in the 4 years I attended that school, I devoured a ton of the books in that room.
Sweet. Same question, different medium. What are your favorite games? Also 1, 2, 3.
Oh, that's so hard. I would have to say I'll probably put Halo at number 1, because I have no doubt played Halo more than any other game ever. And it's not just because I worked on the original Halos. It's just, I love the universe. And I love what happens there. It's plus multiplayer, Halo multiplayer is it's fun. That's how I relax. Honestly, it's like if I have some free time, which is very rare, but if I want to just relax, I'll just fire up Halo multiplayer and play a few rounds. And I know some people say that is not relaxing, but to me it is. Because I know the maps, I know the game. It's just like I don't have to think about it. You just kind of go through the motions. I also have loved the Assassin's Creed series because I love the melding of history and geography and fiction. I think they've done such a great job with that series. I mean, yeah, the series itself has had a few ups and downs in terms of which specific Assassin's Creed you're talking about. But as a whole, I really love the work there. And in the same way, I think some of my more favorite games is the Elder Scrolls series. my first Elder Scrolls was Morrowind, and then then Oblivion, and then Skyrim, of course. And that world has been fantastic. I love exploring that world. But honestly, I got to say, if I throw in just like a little footnote, I think Breath of the Wild and what they did with Breath of the Wild, I had kind of gone off Nintendo to a certain degree, and I wasn't really interested in Zelda anymore. I played Ocarina of Time years ago, but then when I picked up Breath of the Wild, I was just absolutely blown away. I do consider it one of the best games ever made. And eventually I'll play Tears of the Kingdom. I'm too busy with Diablo 4 at the moment.
Same. Yeah. And this is also, yes, where we have to finish up. It's the evening time. That's my Diablo time. I have to get leveling again.
Same here.
Great choices. Who is somebody from the games industry who you would like to get to know? If you have, probably you've met everybody.
I was going to say, I know a lot of people in the industry, so I'm trying to think of like who do I not know well. I think if I had to choose, I would go back to like the beginning, like people like Roberta Williams and some of the pioneers of the industry, because I don't know them, even though I've gotten to meet a couple of them now. I know Nolan Bushnell, and I know a couple other folks. I've met Alexei, the creator of Tetris. That was really cool to meet him. But there are some of the people who are really at the front end of this entire industry, I think would have been awesome to meet. And I have not met them. So I think that would be my choice.
In your case, we will totally let that slide, because I don't know what would be a more fitting answer, as well as there is always a trap integrated into that where we give ourselves a challenge, basically, to connect you with that person. We will not be able to travel back in time. I can already promise that, but I think again, it's a very fitting question and answer. Sorry, what I would expect. Who is someone who you think we should have on this podcast?
Oh, there's a lot of great people. I just, two names come to mind immediately from my Microsoft days. One is Shannon Loftus, who's an amazing person. I worked with her for many years at Microsoft, and one of her last functions there was to run the World's Edge team, which basically brought the Age of Empires franchise back to life. And so after I'd worked on all the Age of Empires and Age of Mythology years and years ago, she brought me back to work on Age of Empires 4, which I'm still working on to this day with a lot of the DLC. And so I think Shannon would be a fascinating person to talk to and get her perspective. And I also think Kiki Wolfkill, who's one of the executive producers at 343, she is the executive producer for the Halo TV show, but I've known her for many, many years. We worked together all those years ago on many different game projects, and she has a utterly fascinating background that involves car racing and a lot of other really cool stuff. So I think she alone, I love her backstory.
And what a name!
It's truly amazing. Yeah, and her name is just freaking awesome.
Built Rockstar Life, built from the beginning.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Sweet. We are at the end. Last question. Where can people find you? Please, I know you are a geographer. Do not give us your physical location, but what we mean is where can people find you on the internet if they want to know more about you?
So probably I'm on LinkedIn. You can easily find me on LinkedIn. I do, and that's probably the best place to find me if you want to just like look at the career info. There's obviously like on Twitter, I'm Geogrify. And I don't post a lot on there, but I am on there. People are welcome to find me there. Of course, I've got associated things like SetJetters app on Twitter, and there's SetJetters on Instagram, and all of that. There's all the kind of the stuff around me. I have a website, geogrify.com, although it's currently under construction. I'm redoing it finally after like 15 years. And then I don't really use like TikTok or Instagram that much at all. Just frankly don't have time for it. So I would say probably LinkedIn or Twitter is probably the best place. Or if you find that we're connected on, or we might be connected on Facebook, you can try and find me there too.
All right. Perfect. Thank you so much, Kate, for this amazing time, for sharing all your stories, for giving us your time, and for being the first guest of this new season of our now podcast that is called I Play, Therefore I Am.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much. It was great to be here.
And thank you as well. I'm so thrilled. I don't think I've had an episode where I spoke so little, and I just felt like a listener. And great story, and a big petition to have you back. Maybe at the tail end of the season to to just finish the story. I loved the long story. I was so immersed. I have 1,000 questions for you now. Really annoying at the end of a podcast. I'm a little bit angry. So it was
Maybe
such a
there's
joy
no
to
end.
yeah. Such a,
Well, I'm more than happy to come back and talk more, because there is a lot of other stuff we could dive into. So, anytime you want, just
thank
let
you
me
so
know.
much, Kate. It was such a thrill. Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Bye.
Bye.